Welcome to another edition of the River Radio Sports Central podcast alongside Matt Varney from ESPN 103.5. I'm Darren Kinnard. Of course, the podcast brought to you by our friends at NovaCare Rehabilitation. And Matty, it's been another interesting week as we proceed during the fall schedule. And again, we start with some golf.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had some great performances. You know, we highlighted River Stilley and Grace Roper.
Mm-hmm.
And then this week, Cash Cantrell ties River Stilley's
How about it?
9-hole score. It just really shows you how good that Benton team is, especially at the top.
Yeah, without a doubt. And they've still got more guys at the below those two that are really good. Benton, once again, just the kings around the area in terms of boys golf. So it's fun to watch them do what they do. Reggie Norman has always got his team ready to go. They've always got someone kind of ready to go next. And to have two guys right now, man, look out. They might be bringing home hardware this year.
Well, speaking of hardware, we're going to talk about the postseason. Assignments are out, of course, for the regionals and where those feed into the sectionals. And I will always preface major criticism of the IHSA with, look, by and large, you know, with the scope of what they do a tremendous job. I think They get far too much blame in a lot of situations. But one of my pet peeves is it surrounds postseason,
Mm-hmm.
and when we get to basketball and the other sports where seeds, that'll be another topic for another day. But today I want to talk about the postseason assignments, and there's a couple of anomalies that show up, and this started in our group text. Hey, did you see this? Well, this is ZRC is hosting a girls 1A regional at Franklin County Country Club. Because West Frankfort is not hosting, and all the things that go into that, and, you know, the teams get sent here, there, and yon, West Frankfort does not get to play on their home course, which, okay, whatever. They are being sent to Mount Carmel.
It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. When it comes to hosting a regional and a sectional and whatnot, in golf, it does matter a little bit, but you go to a course so many times, usually in a year anyways, that it's not the same thing as, oh, we've only done it one time. Like back in the days of the Carbondale Holiday Tournament, it was, hey, you're going to come play here in the Super Sectional, come and experience it a few times, so it's not your first time playing when you're playing in the Super Sectional. It's not the same thing in golf. You usually will see yourself play a course once or twice in a year. So West Frankfort, if they haven't already, probably going to play at that Mount Carmel course once or twice before the postseason. So, I mean, they'll be comfortable with it, but there's not nearly as much of a home course advantage, and it doesn't make sense to me that they have to travel that far when there's something right in their backyard.
Yeah, and again, at some point, common sense has got to prevail, and I would think that you know, hey, we've put out these things, and you know, maybe this wasn't the best circumstance, because you're going to have a team that in their hometown there is a regional, and you're going to make them go. And again, they don't go by travel times; they go by mileage. Mm-hmm. Well, it's 100 miles. It's 100 miles from West Frankfort to Mount Carmel. I did the Google Maps. But it's also 100 miles for Nashville. Mm-hmm. Nashville's coming to Franklin County instead of going to Mount Carmel. And you know, I'm not advocating for Nashville being sent or what. I'm just saying that, you know, there were other options. And when you have something in that town, why on earth are you sending them, you know, an hour 45 away or whatever the travel time ends up being?
The powers that be make decisions, and we don't really get to be privy to what the reasoning is, and maybe we would understand it, maybe we wouldn't. But when it comes down to it, common sense really needs to be applied here. And again, it's in their backyard. Why are you removing them from something like that and making people pay for gas, especially in this economy?
Well, and the thing is that they have some complicated formula that I know some people have been told that is too complicated to you know, for the lay person to understand, and they have to balance out the different regionals. But if West Frankfort has the biggest gripe, 1A has to be Massac County.
Oh, yeah.
Who is being sent to Mount Carmel as well. when they could have gone to Franklin County, which is a 50-minute trip, 55 minutes versus 2:15. So if the tee times start at 9, those ladies from Massac County, which they're familiar with that course, and this isn't even about home course or anything. This is just simply about travel. That's a 2+ hour. They're gonna have to be on the bus well before 6 a.m.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, and it's not fair. And it just creates, when you come down to talking about home course advantage, it creates unfair advantages in things that aren't really, I feel like, thought about when you're creating these pools. You could do a better job, I feel like. Again, we don't know the formula per se, and we don't know who's maybe on the committee making these decisions. But you got to have someone from around the area, I think, come around and say, hey, let's go ahead and go from Metropolis to Mount Carmel. And you say, do you want to go on that 6 a.m. bus trip? Because it is a big deal, and it's just unfair. And when you take into the fact that these are student athletes, these aren't professional athletes. This isn't someone rolling into Valhalla at 6 a.m. This is someone getting on a bus, getting up at 5:30, maybe 5 o'clock to get ready, get to school, get on a bus, and then go. And yet, taking into account that they had homework the night before as well. So it's a very unfair thing to teenagers that are worried about grades just as much as their performance on the field.
And I think that when you get to the sectional level, there's a little bit more of an expectation.
Yeah.
There's less, there are less sites. So, look, we're probably going to have to go 2.5 hours, whatever that is.
But that's sectional.
Right, and not everybody qualifies for sectional, so that doesn't affect everybody. And again, look, the folks in the IHSA can't help it that Massac County is located where it is.
Right.
They can't help the fact that Mount Carmel is located where it is. And it also kind of highlights another issue that when you go through, and I think they've finally got most of the sites filled, but there is less willingness by schools to host. And so there are fewer sites. And so maybe, and I don't know who all had applied from this region, but maybe Mount Carmel was the only one that was available. And again, where they are located on the map, you can't control it. If that's the choice, the only choice, then there's nothing you can do. But then you've got to kind of fill in those teams. And again, the IHSA has proven that they have the ability to send whoever, wherever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, again, common sense got to prevail at some point.
Yeah. You know what? Maybe it needs to come down to a school isn't hosting, and these courses need to just submit for themselves for it, and then no one gets to host, and it becomes a little bit more easy to figure these things out, because you might have things that a course that hasn't hosted in the past that might get a chance. You might get something where it's, again, just if you don't have the host aspect, that might have things happen a little bit better, because then you don't have to worry about, okay, well, West Frankfort wouldn't be hosting on their home site. So where's the closest that they could go? When it comes to regionals, I think it always needs to come down to how close can they get to their home from wherever they're going. How far away do they have to go? And let's keep them as close as possible.
And Hamilton County is another example that, they've hosted at Green Hills and Mount Vernon, because their home course is only 9 holes. And, and you can't host an IHSA event on a 9-hole course. So, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. And then you start thinking about, okay, this region, and I'm sure there are certain other regions that are similar. But when you look at the number of golf courses that are close to 57, and you mentioned, hey, maybe the golf courses can get involved, but you're looking at the likes of Green Hills and Mount Vernon, or Greenview and Centralia, Wren Lake. There's just numerous courses that could be more centrally located. Again, I guess it boils down to, hey, if you don't like the travel aspect of it, then you better put in the host and at least get control your destiny.
Right, exactly. And people can. We started with this basically, that people have their gripes with the IHSA. I would call it a necessary evil. You need to have these bodies that help set everything up. Otherwise, it's the wild, wild west. But yeah, I think there might need to, if this is going to continue, I think there needs to be a new approach to how. at least regionals. I just think sites in general, though, probably need to be decided.
And look, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's probably, that it's some piece of cake job to figure out where we're going to – there's 800 schools. There maybe half of those play golf.
Right.
And we're going to divide them into 3 classes. And, it's all across the state. And we've got to figure – I get that and appreciate that. But you just have to when there's a course that is hosting a regional in the town that a school is in, just because they aren't hosting doesn't mean you ship them 2 hours away.
Right. Well, maybe because as we allude to, Illinois is a big state. Maybe to find a solution, maybe you look to one of the other big states. People are deceived by how big Illinois is when you're out of state. This is a state that you can go 6-7 hours in and stay in, depending on where you start. So maybe you look at a Texas or a California and say, how did they do things? And maybe you'll get an idea on how to fix this issue that is seeming to crop up more and more these past few years.
Let's switch gears now. We'll talk a little bit of volleyball, and we're recording on Thursday, and tonight is the championship, or the final night of the Kathy Black Invitational at NCOE, the final match. And, when the round robins are set up, the last match is usually the championship match, and it's set up to be tonight, Carmi-White County and NCOE, 2 of the top teams. We talked about those 2 plus Nashville really kind of, setting the pace here early on, and they've already met once. Carmi won at Fairfield, and so they meet again tonight, and I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Oh, that's going to be a great game. First of all, Carmi-White's coach just got win number 100 Wednesday night, so they're amped up about that. But then, you're at NCOE, and they're looking for revenge. And I don't know what the schedule looks like, but given their how close they are to each other in that region, you probably see each other a third time this year, if not in the regular season, then in regionals or sectionals. And so, this is the next chapter in this year's edition of this rivalry, and it should be a good one tonight.
And last year covered this championship match, and the one thing that Coach Melton from NCOE told me, she's like, look, these girls all know each other. A lot of them play together in the travel team circuit. It's cool that you have that opportunity that maybe, with Carmi going to the 2A state and then NCOE almost got to the 1A state.
Right, yeah.
You have that opportunity that, both teams can go and represent the South. But yet when you get on the floor, it's that whole mindset, that, look, you're my friend,
right?
In an hour and a half.
Well, and you've seen in recent years, I feel like those type of rivalries coming back. I feel like the maybe mid 2000s, for about maybe 2005 to 2015, it was started in professional leagues of, hey, these are my buddies. I want to play them, but I don't really want to get too heated with them. And then things kind of started to shift in those professional leagues, and everything that had seeped into the high school level and the college levels started to also make that shift. It went from being hey, this is my buddy, I like playing against him, but now it's starting to get heated. And I talked from seeing just football earlier this year. Carbondale, Murfreesboro, recent years had been kind of like laid back a little bit, like, we're all friends, whatever. This year, and I think you saw it, I think you arrived just in time right before halftime, things got heated. Right. And it was they broke it up before it got too bad, but that's starting to cross over into all the other sports as well.
Let's shift gears one more time. We'll talk football as we get ready to head into week 3. And the fact that by the end of this weekend, we are a third of the way done with the regular season is crazy.
It's blown by real quick. And, Friday the 13th, we're going to see some interesting things, I have a feeling.
Well, unfortunately, I'm afraid that one of those interesting things involves the weather. And we talked a lot about weather, week 1 being, potentially up in the air. But I think there's a little more certainty that it's at least going to be wet for the majority of the teams and games, if not all. Obviously, the remnants of Hurricane Francine moving this direction from the south, so the games to the south obviously are in a different, probably in a worse situation. Right. But still, you're looking at the potential for wind and rain if that's all you get.
Right.
The potential for storms and delays. We've talked about turf and how that kind of changes the equation. But if they do play in the rain, if there's no lightning and it's playing in the rain, yes, turf eliminates the mud and the grime and all that. It's still a completely different game.
Yeah, it still is tough to throw through the air without a doubt. That extra little bit of pressure affects passes. It's tougher to catch even if you got the gloves on. It is just it's a completely different game. If you're a ground and pound type of team, you usually are like, yeah, bring it on. But if you like to throw through the air, it makes things a lot more difficult. And I'll say this much. So Murfreesboro is known for being a ground and pound type of team. This year, they have been passing a little bit more. And even if they do ground and pound, they like to do a lot of trickery and hand it off maybe a few times before the snap, or rather before it gets to the line of scrimmage, I should say. And that's basically like a pass. So they're a team that could get affected in a very big game at Benton. But I will also say I recently, just maybe like 10 minutes before we came in here, did see an updated forecast of that rain may hold off a little bit for Friday. We're going to see a lot of it Thursday night, and it may be able to be circumvented a little bit Friday night.
You will get no complaints from me.
Right, me too.
One of the worst things for me is, anybody who knows me, I hate shooting in rain gear on the sidelines.
Just don't take my word for it, though.
Well, I mean, you're not a weather guy,
no.
and I didn't play one on TV, and I didn't sleep in a Holiday Inn last night, so not an official. But again, it's also not just the rain or the wet. The wind could be a factor, and you mentioned the passing teams. I was over at Harrisburg earlier in the week. Owen Rand was our first primetime performer for Radio Sports Central, and I asked him, I said, well, as a quarterback, how do you prepare? How do you when you don't know what it's going to be? And he said, well, he's like, we do some wet ball drills in practice, and you do everything that you can to simulate it just in case. There's you just don't know when it comes to weather.
You got to be prepared for these type of situations. And a program like Harrisburg and a quarterback like Owen Rand, they're going to be prepared for whatever gets thrown at them. But they want to be prepared if it does rain. They want to be able to make sure that they are able to still open up the entire playbook and say, we're going to do this.
All right, let's look at the Week 3 schedule ahead. We'll start with the conference games. A biggie in the Black Diamond. Fairfield, the Mules saw their first action last week, beat El Dorado 28-20. Cesar-Valera-Waltonville also 2-0. Both of those teams have forfeit wins over Vienna-Goreville. SVW has 2 weeks to prepare for this one. It is going to be at SVW, and if we end up getting the amount of rain, that field is going to be a mess. Yeah,
without a doubt. It should be a good one. I am hearing that SVW might be dealing with a few injuries here or there, so that will play a role. Fairfield, last week, people thought they were going to stomp through El Dorado. El Dorado might be a little bit better than people thought because they were hanging with the Mules the entire time. So we're going to get a clearer picture of the upper echelon of the Black Diamond this Friday, because these two teams that are considered upper echelon teams of the Black Diamond, they're meeting, and we're going to find out just how good are these two teams. Cesar-Valera having 2 weeks to prepare is going to be huge. But at the same time, there's factors for both teams where it's like, are they what we saw last year? Are they maybe down? Are they up? We're not sure yet. We're going to find out, though.
And you mentioned the Eagles. They they opened with a win at Edwards County, played Fairfield tough. They go home this week, and they get Johnston City. The Indians, who have been an express so far in the first 2 weeks, $180 million to nothing, their 2 week tally. Now the Indians go on the road to face El Dorado, and it will be interesting to see. Are the Eagles that challenging for that top echelon, as you say, or is Johnston City just that much better than the rest of the group?
Right, exactly. Well, and talking with people last week when we were talking about Carterville, it was more so like you don't need to win at Nashville to say, hey, we are okay. I think for El Dorado, if they want to prove that, hey, we are improving, we are the team that people think that we are the team that should be receiving a vote or two in the AP poll like they did this week. If they want to prove that, they need to hang with Johnston City, which is a tough task to perform. JC is a train rolling through everybody, which they have been the past couple of years. But if El Dorado can say, hey, we kept it within a score or two, that's going to be a moral victory, which I know Joe Clark is already shaking his head saying,
Right.
no moral victories, only real victories. But if you want to impress, if you're El Dorado, if you can keep it within a score or two, then you're doing pretty good.
And again, with the field and the game conditions can be the great equalizer sometimes, and you may end up with a game that's 7-6, and it comes down to a conversion or something like that. So the other games in the Diamond, Flores at Edwards County, CZR hosts Hamilton County, Carmi-White County supposed to play Vienna-Goreville. The Bulldogs will take the forfeit win this week, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Noah Pollard.
I know.
Unbelievable. That young man, he followed off a great week 1 with an even better week 2. He ran for 298 yards in the win over Hamilton County, 4 touchdowns on the ground, and then, he returned a kickoff, 85 yards for a score, too.
He is unreal, and I believe they had another running back that got over 100 yards rushing last week as well. Just fantastic. And before we shift from the Diamond also, that CZR-Hamco matchup, really interesting. Both teams looking for their first win. Hamco, especially this year, even though they're 0-2, looking pretty darn good. And CZR last week really had people turning their heads saying, well, hold on a minute, the Bearcats might be onto something.
Yeah, and they go on the road last week to Flora, and that ends up being a tight game, and CZR was actually driving late with a chance to win it. So the Bearcats trying to get the corner turn there. Conference game in the South 7, pretty big one as well. Marion, who's 2-0, the Wildcats just whacked Granite City 51-0. They go on the road to Mount Vernon. The Rams bounce back from that week 1 loss to Waterloo with a win over Carbondale in their conference opener. So this was a dandy last year at Wildcat Stadium. Have no reason to expect otherwise, Friday night.
Yeah, Marion trying to prove, because they kind of had, I wouldn't call them cupcakes by any means. Heron, not a cupcake. We're seeing that they are already starting to figure things out under a new coach. Granite City just struggling this year, clearly, with a loss of their head coach and their starting quarterback. But they were able to put the wall up on both of them. So a big one for them as they open conference. Meanwhile, Mount Vernon has a chance to move to 2-0 in the South 7 in week 3. You move to 2-0 in the South 7 in week 3. You can't turn on the cruise control yet, but you're sitting there saying, hey, we're looking pretty good right now. So it's a big game for both of these teams.
Little Illini also opens up conference play, continuing with that theme. Mount Carmel, 0-2, is at Robinson. It's Casey Westfield at Newton. Richland County, who's 2-0. The Tigers host Lawrenceville with a chance to start 3-0, and it's Marshall at Paris. Let's talk about some non-conference action. The game of the night, we talked about 2 conference games. To me, the third game of the night is a non-conference game, and it's the one you'll have the call, Murphy at Benton.
Yeah, Murphy at Benton is going to be a heck of a game. I'll tell you what, walking in, I've had to talk to a couple people that have already seen the Benton Rangers, and I've said, is that defense for real? You've put up 97, 96 points, and you haven't allowed a single score against you. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's for real. So, but Murfreesboro has a dynamic offense, and as long as the rain doesn't affect things, I would expect, I'm going to put the spoiler on here, I expect Murfreesboro to get that first score against Benton this year. So it should be a really good game. You're hoping it is. You hope it's a close one. You hope it's a dynamic one. Murfreesboro's defense, a little bit younger than it was last year. They had 7 seniors on it, and this year they've got some new faces in there, but so far they're looking pretty darn good as well. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a 28-26 type of game. I also wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being a 10-7 type of game. So it should be a really good game, and everybody's just hoping and praying that's the case. I'm sure Benton, though, would like to say, yeah, after week 3 we're 141-0. But I think everybody else is saying, all right, this has got to be a good game.
Well, and I think for so many years, this was the game to decide the Ohio.
Yes.
And 2 years ago, or last year rather, Benton, 2 years ago was the last meeting in conference. With Benton going to the Mississippi side, it's now a non-conference game. And it seems fitting that this is the game that will send, close out the non-conference slate here. And again, it's a great measuring stick. Big picture, it's never too early for me to start talking about playoff seeding. Biggest picture is playoff seeding.
Yeah.
But with no conference implications, it's not the end of the earth. But I think it is a great opportunity to see where both teams stand stacking up against one of the other better teams in the area.
Absolutely. Well, Benton has a chance to move to 3-0, and you're sitting real nice there in the Mississippi if you're moving into 3-0 at that point. And if you're doing that, you're probably sitting there with only a few scores against you, if any at all. Meanwhile, Murfreesboro, if they don't win this one, they're starting the season 1-2, and not that they don't have winnable games in front of them, but the winnable games, a lot of them are on the road, and you never can count out the home team in these games. So it's going to be interesting. If the Red Devils start 1-2, how can they bounce back? And they got to bounce back quick, because then week 7, 8, 9, you've got a murderer's row of Harrisburg, Carterville, DuQuoin. It is not going to be easy if they start out 1-2. They got to right the ship one way or another. So for Murfreesboro especially, they need this win. But Benton also is like, well, if we slip up here, then other people are going to find cracks in the armor. And so it's very important for both these teams that are both rolling. It's important because if you fall, all of a sudden other teams are going to start saying, we know the weakness here.
You mentioned, some of the teams that, you obviously want to avoid that 1-2 start. It feels like there's a handful of 2-0s and just a slew of 1-1s.
Yeah.
That list includes DuQuoin, who beat Harrisburg last week. Big bounce back performance from the Indians. DuQuoin goes on the road to Heron. The Tigers still looking for their first win. Harrisburg's 1-1 going to Pinckneyville. So you've got a couple teams there that we saw last week face off against each other. Both have to go on the road this week, but opportunities there to go 2-1.
Yeah, and another one that we're looking at here is West Frankfort playing Carterville, 2-0 West Frankfort. This is another one that it's like, hey, you move to 3-0, and people are going to start taking you seriously, whereas if Carterville gets that win, they're like, we finally have righted that. You win at Nashville, and you probably feel like you've righted the ship, but if you get 2 in a row, it's like, okay, we're back to normal. We're where we want to be. A loss for either of these teams, West Frankfort could fall from grace, essentially, and go to 2-1, and then opponents are looking at it and being like, oh, yeah, we figured it out now. And for Carterville, again, 1-2 in the Ohio, that is a tough place to start at.
Yeah, and for Frankfort to, if you go on the road and you beat Carterville, which last year the game at Frankfort comes down to the very end. Right. It was a 4-point game, I believe, and the Redbirds had some chances to win, and I know there was some controversy, but it's a situation where Frankfort has the ability to play with Carterville, and if you go on the road. And they talk about stamping. Hey, we are legit. We are here, and we're going to make some noise this year.
And honestly, they do look legit. The question is, can you start out 3-0? Because when's the last time West Frankfort started 3-0? They've been waiting. Day or two. They've been waiting for this moment, and it's finally here on the back of Travion Johnson and everybody else. You start out 3-0, you're halfway to ensuring yourself into the playoffs. You're 2 wins away from punching your ticket, but 3 wins will get you for sure into that. So starting 3-0 for West Frankfort would be massive. So it's going to be a good game. Both teams are going to fight hard for their own reasons.
And again, Carterville in that same boat as Murfreesboro. 1-2 start heading into the Ohio is not ideal. You look at Anna Jonesboro at Massac County, 2 teams in search of their first wins. Looking at the South 7 squads, one more River. Nashville is at Westland. The Hornets looking to rebound after the loss at home to Carterville. On to the South 7, Carbondale. Again, another team looking to bounce back. Another 1-1 team facing 1-1 Collinsville. It's in Carbondale, which helps. But again, Collinsville coming off a close win over Centralia the week before.
Right, exactly. And Carbondale looking like they're a bit better than Centralia this year. So you should, if you're a Terrier fan, probably walk into this one feeling okay, pretty good. You got 2 of the top receivers in Southern Illinois on that team, and Woolley throwing right now is looking fantastic. And then you can't miscount Mozzie Graham as well. Their offense is dynamic and good. But the question is, can you beat a team like Collinsville, who is big and fast, and it's one of those teams that's just like, oh yeah, they're a Metro team. They're gonna be good, aren't they? So it will be a good game without a doubt, and it's an important one for both teams. Collinsville not officially a South 7 team, but they kind of fit in there into the conference right now on that trial run. And so it's going to be a big game for both of them, obviously, for their own reasons. It's Collinsville, I would think, is probably trying to make an argument for, we should be in this conference, you should definitely take us if when this trial run ends. Whereas Carbondale's like, we just got to get back on the right foot.
And last week, Centralia missed a field goal late, final minute that would have won the game at Collinsville. This week, the Orphans go on the road to Waterloo, who already owns a win over Mount Vernon. The Bulldogs are 2-0, so a tough test for the Orphans.
Without a doubt, and as we talked about last week, transitional wins aren't really wins, but if you're Centralia and you walk in, or you get a win over Waterloo, you're sitting there saying, okay, again, back on the right foot, and you feel a little bit confident of like, well, this team beat Mount Vernon, so in theory, we might be able to do it. But yeah, that South 7 is a conference this year that is just looking loaded and competitive, and someone is going to probably win it by just a hair. It's going to be down to the last second, I think, on that whole conference.
And we talk a lot about the 4 teams in our area,
right.
and then the road's eventually going to have to go through Cahokia one way or the other.
Yes, it is. I mean, last year they were in the 4A postseason, looking like they were going to be potentially the 16th seed, and it was like nobody wants that. Nobody wants that 16th seed. So Cahokia is just that good. And they play against some really good teams. And recently, they've been giving those teams a run for their money, beating those teams as well.
And when you look at some of the other games on the schedule for Friday night, schools out of the Cahokia, Chester is at Freeburg. The Yellow Jackets won at DeCoin, an impressive Week 1 win. They hammer Pinckneyville in Week 2. Now they have to go on the road and face a bigger school out of the Cahokia, out of division. So it's still a non-conference game, but I think this is a big test for the Yellow Jackets.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of the 2-0 teams that we're talking about today, it is can you actually swim in the deep water right now? You know, you've had your opportunities, you've gotten a couple of wins, maybe a surprise win in the first 2 weeks, depending on who you're talking about. But now you're swimming with the big boys. Can you actually do it? Benton is probably the 1-2-0 team that isn't everyone looking at being like, are you for real? Everybody else, the 2-0s, there might be one or two that I might be not thinking of right now, but most of the 2-0s, everyone's like, this Week 3 is a big test for you. Can you prove? So anyone that comes out of Week 3, 3-0, I think is going to be proven, yeah, they're for real, they're pretty good, or, okay, we know what the issue with that team is now, why some other teams couldn't beat them, and can now other teams take advantage of that? So it's going to be interesting. But, yeah, Chester, Freeburg, I've got my eye on that one as well.
Salem's at home against Mount Zion. The Wildcats looking for their first win. Breeze Central, the number 2 team in the Associated Press 4A poll, is at home against Redbud. Sparta on the road at Moweaqua Central A&M. That's not an easy trip to
make. At all. Not at all. But, hey, you got to do what's got to be done. And if you can take down Central A&M, 1 and 2, you're looking okay as the Bulldogs. You say, okay, fine, put the 2 first weeks behind you, and you just move on because you got to win over Central A&M.
Exactly. And a couple other games of interest. We mentioned Cahokia. They're at home against Granite City, so the Comanches looking to bounce back from last week's loss. They lost to perennial Missouri power Jackson.
Yeah.
And then on Saturday, East St. Louis is at Philadelphia, a charter school out of Philadelphia, and Eastside has a chance to go 3-0. We sat here 2 weeks ago going, man, their schedule, what a murderer's row to start with, and now they go on the road with an opportunity to go 3-0.
Yeah, I mean, again, you start 3-0 in your season, and you're feeling really confident, really good about things. So we'll find out how good this Philadelphia team is. I have to assume, because as you said, murderer's row, but I have to assume they didn't go out and schedule cupcakes from other states and anything. They said, we want to play the best, so then when it comes time to go to that 6A title game, we're ready to go.
And I would say that in Eastside's case, even if they were 1 and 2 or 0 and 3, they'd still feel okay about themselves.
Probably, because they'd probably be like, we know what the issue is with this team now let's fix it.
Well, that's going to do it for us for the River Radio Sports Central podcast. Be sure to join me Friday night after the games for Friday Night Live, powered by Charlie's AC and Heating. And, of course, we thank you for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you next week on the River Radio Sportscast, powered by NovaCare Rehabilitation. For Matty V, I'm Darren Kinnard. Have a great week, everyone.